just might work out that you get more sort of basic freedom.
What if Syd Barrett never left Pink Floyd? Not in the sense of being cured or fixed or somehow made easier to manage, but simply in the most human way possible. What if he had remained part of the room where the music was being made? Because when you listen closely to Pink Floyd after 1968, it's hard not to hear his absence as much as their presence. The band's greatest work often feels like it's circling something that can no longer be touched, as if the music itself is aware that someone important is missing. So tonight, instead of retelling the story we already know, let's sit with the question that has followed Pink Floyd for more than 50 years. What if Syd Barrett never left the band? In the beginning, Syd Barrett wasn't just a member of Pink Floyd. He was the point around which everything else revolved. The sound, the attitude, even the idea that a band could be strange without apology, all came naturally to him. Roger Waters would later look back on those early days and say, Syd was the guiding light of the early band. That single sentence explains more than pages of analysis ever could. Nick Mason, writing with the clarity of hindsight, was even more direct. Syd was the creative force. He was the one who wrote the songs. That wasn't a romantic memory, it was a statement of fact. Rick Wright, who rarely spoke in dramatic terms, reduced it even further when he said, Syd was our inspiration. When someone like Wright chooses words that carefully, you understand that what was lost wasn't just material, but a way of thinking that couldn't be replaced. What happened to Syd didn't happen all at once. It wasn't a single collapse or a dramatic moment where everything suddenly went wrong. It was a slow unraveling that took place in full view of an industry that had no reason to slow down. By late 1967, Pink Floyd were being pushed forward by their own success. There were tours to complete, television appearances to make, and expectations to meet, all of it arriving at once. Syd, already fragile and inward-looking, was being asked to function in a world that rewarded constant output and punished hesitation. Years later, Nick Mason would admit, we didn't realize at the time how fragile he really was. That admission matters because it suggests that what happened wasn't indifference or cruelty, but misunderstanding. David Gilmour, who had known Syd before fame complicated everything, later put it more bluntly. He wasn't mad in the way people like to say. He was damaged by the situation he was put in. When you hear it phrased like that, the story stops feeling inevitable and starts feeling avoidable. Once you accept that idea, the question becomes difficult to ignore. If the situation damaged Syd, then what might have happened if the situation had changed instead? Imagine a moment where the touring stops, where the pressure eases, and where success is allowed to wait. There is nothing miraculous about this scenario. It simply involves time, space, and the absence of constant demands. History gives us reason to think this mattered. When Syd was removed from expectation and left to work alone, he could still write, still record, still create music that carried his unmistakable voice. The problem was never the lack of imagination, but the environment in which it was expected to perform on command. In this alternate path, Pink Floyd chooses patience. David Gilmour still joins the band, but not as a replacement. He becomes a stabilizing presence, someone who can translate Syd's ideas into a structure that the rest of the group can hold on to. The band begins to function differently. No single person dominates, and no single vision overwhelms the others. Nick Mason once reflected that Syd's greatest contribution wasn't only his songs, but the freedom he introduced, the sense that the band could follow ideas wherever they led without needing to explain themselves. Eventually, this version of Pink Floyd reaches the moment where they begin working on The Dark Side of the Moon. In our reality, the album reflects anxieties about time, pressure, and mental strain, themes that grew out of watching people fracture under expectation. But imagine writing that album while the person who inspired those themes was still present, still contributing, still quietly listening from the corner of the room. Syd wouldn't need to take control of the record to change it. His presence alone would alter its weight. Small ideas, unfinished fragments, and slightly unstable textures would introduce a different kind of honesty, one that doesn't observe mental fragility from a distance but lives beside it. In that context, a song like Brain Damage becomes less of a reflection and more of a conversation, and the album's power comes not from detachment, but from proximity. There is, however, an unavoidable consequence to saving Syd. If he never leaves, Wish You Were Here cannot exist in the form we know. That album is shaped by absence, by grief, and by the strange experience of missing someone who is still alive. Rick Wright once reflected on the years after Syd left and said, "After Syd left, we had to find another way of working. Nothing ever came as easily again." That difficulty, painful as it was, became the emotional gravity that defined Pink Floyd's most resonant work. Without that loss, the music continues, but it turns outward rather than inward. There is more exploration and less mourning, more curiosity and less reflection. The band remains inventive, but the emotional center shifts in a way that is impossible to measure. From here, the story can only end in one of two ways. In one version, Syd stabilizes over time, the band remains balanced, and Pink Floyd continues as a collective longer than anyone might have expected. In the other, too many ideas begin to pull in different directions, and the group fractures earlier, not from anger, but from creative overload. David Gilmour once said, "Syd was a genius." That word gets thrown around a lot, but he really was. Genius expands what's possible, but it also introduces fragility when it isn't carefully supported. So what if Syd Barrett never left Pink Floyd? Perhaps the music becomes gentler, or perhaps it becomes stranger. Perhaps the greatest albums are never written, or perhaps they are replaced by others we can no longer imagine. What we do know is that in the world we live in, Syd's absence became part of the band's identity. The space he left behind shaped the music as much as any sound that was ever recorded. And it's possible that Pink Floyd didn't just lose Syd Barrett. It's possible they were defined by the space where he used to be.
It was never meant to last, and you could not imagine Syd Barrett making another 3 or 4 albums with Pink Floyd. You could not imagine, to saying this as a fan looking from the outside, it's impossible to imagine him having a 40-odd year career in the way that David Gilmour and Roger Waters have had, playing Live 8, touring and playing stadiums. That's not what Syd Barrett was all about. And to many of the people that knew him, and people who have spoken about this, is, he wasn't meant for this world, if you like. He was an artist, and he was an artist who was dabbling in pop music. He gave up his studies as an artist to go away and become a pop star. And like many, many people since, it didn't suit him.
There's also a sense that